The Vatican says more than 250,000 people have gathered to pay their respects at the funeral of Pope Francis. Royals, world leaders and cardinals joined worshippers to commemorate the life of the 266th pontiff.
For the final time, Pope Francis emerged into St. Peter's Square. For more than a decade, he had led the world's Catholic population, but now was the time to say goodbye. With infinite care, his coffin was carried out, a notably plain design for a man who treasured simplicity. Francis was laid down, still being treated with the greatest reverence. Above, a cloudy morning had given way to sunshine. 250,000 people were crammed into the streets and squares of the Vatican, a sense of celebration as well as sadness. The Church and its devotees had lost a leader. There were other leaders here. Some of the best-known people in the world came. There were talks behind the scenes, but in public, this was nothing less than a solemn show of respect. Francis was remembered with affection and admiration, a man who kept working until the very eve of his death.
Despite his frailty and suffering towards the end, Pope Francis chose to follow this path of self-giving until the last day of his earthly life.
And as Presidents Trump and Zelensky looked on, fresh from their talks about the conflict in Ukraine, the world remembered a pope who loathed the destruction of war. Before the moment when the congregation is asked to shake hands with each other, an act that can surprise even those who've shaken 1,000,000 hands. But it is a symbolic gesture, known as a sign of peace. This was a funeral that felt both intimate and enormous, watched by the cardinals who will meet next month to pick the next pope. One of these men will succeed Francis. His coffin was lifted and tipped gently towards the congregation. The final act of farewell. And then, slowly, slowly, carried back into the shadows and grandeur of the Basilica. Popes are normally buried in the Vatican, but not Francis. His coffin was now carried by his Pope-mobile vehicle for a journey through Rome, watched by more vast crowds. The final stop, this one, the Basilica Santa Maria Maggiore, the Pope's favourite church, the place where he asked to be buried. This was the church, the place that he always came back to, where he found solace and peace. And now it is where Pope Francis will rest forever. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Vatican City.